Right? Yes. Okay, welcome to Working Draft Revision, what is it, 53, I think? So, on the Smashing Magazine meetup with Vitaly here, right here from Smashing Magazine, Heilman and Irish. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you very much for your time and everything. We just heard the talks, and I'm going to ask some questions right now. So, we're interested in, it seemed kind of weird on the web. We had all those web developer feuds from Germany. You could see it from the outside a little bit. And we're interested in kind of what's happening there. Is it constructive? Is it destructive? Are there going to be divides now between the people that we kind of look up to and that we learn a lot from? Or is there something, are people going to work together?
Seeing that Paul just had a dispute with Zellman, and we know it's a tough topic. Maybe
sure.
You want to.
So I think yes, I had a dispute at something with Jeffrey Zellman, and I think what it came down to in this case was somewhat of a miscommunication. And then everything got very exciting very quickly, and it doesn't seem like in particular that one was constructive. I think that I've seen plenty of other fights that have been far more constructive. In our case, we've since been talking on email, and so we're good. We're not fighting, and we're trying to figure out ways to work together constructively in the future, which is a really good thing. So, in our case, it wasn't a good day. I think it was like a Friday. Yeah, it wasn't a good Friday, but that's okay. We've moved on. Things are good.
Awesome.
I think actually we as a community are strong enough to be able to deal with stuff like that. I mean, if so many people are involved in projects, be it open source project or be it just something that people have different opinions on, there are always ground or reason for fighting, so people start fighting, right? But we are, I think, mature enough to, in the end, boil down to the actual nature of the problem and discuss the problem, the nature of the issue that needs to be discussed. So personally, I don't see a problem there. Occasionally, there are like things like that happening, but it happens everywhere all the time, I guess. So.
It's actually a massive topic. It's there's so many. I mean, I could just give a talk about it more or less, but I'm doing more about it in the future because there's a lot of miscommunication between the community and the people they look up to as well. A lot of people have out of a sudden like fame thrust upon them. They build something cool, and out of a sudden everything they say on stage is basically seen as like a great thing to retweet and to tell to other people and like take out of context and talk to other people. So as a speaker, and when I coach people on speaking as well, you have to learn to sometimes temper yourself and sometimes realize that what you say will be taken out of context and held against you if you do something. I had a big discussion with people about that when they had like controversial slides with like naked women on them and stuff like that. And you're like, well, you just got people's attention, but that's like taking somebody in the shin and then asking the way to the train station. You have his attention, but not going to have him helping you. So a lot of the disputes are actually flamed by the community or by other people, especially when it comes to comment threads. So the people disagreeing at the beginning probably didn't have a problem at all, but a lot of people think it's their God-given right to actually step in and take one side or the other and speak on behalf of that person. So most of the fights that I analyzed lately were actually that a lot of other people started profiling themselves by saying like, oh, I totally agree, and Paul is a bastard for telling Zeltman that, and these kind of things. And that's what actually, but as a community, we should be like, wait, you've got nothing to do with this. Why are you actually chiming in here? Do you want to profile yourself? Do you want to do that? You can have cynical ideas that some people might be afraid that their impact, that they got used to the fame that they had, and the fame is diminishing, so they're trying to spark controversy again. A few people do it for laughs. I mean, I know people, sometimes you can set your watch to some tweet coming from some person at some time. You know it's going to be controversial and have a Friday afternoon fight for that. I think it's destructive. It doesn't help us. We'd rather should discuss things that should be fixed rather than personal levels and getting personal as well. It's a very sad state of affairs that people can only argue when they get personal.
Yeah, actually I would agree, and I think that the problem here is that also, maybe just me, but over the last years I noticed that people have a different mentality, have developed a different mentality now, but they're much less critical than they used to be. Like 4 or 5 years ago when we had all these CSS debates about the best tag and so on, like there is this, I wouldn't say good part of the community, but very active members of the community who do a lot, and there are other members who just say, okay, agree, dot, this is my comment, I agree, dot, and that's it, and then I don't agree, dot, and both cases are not helpful at all. So, okay, if you agree, explain why, if you don't agree, explain why as well. It's just if you're participating and if you're trying to contribute something, be it something good or something not so good, it's good anyway, because you're doing something active.
Yeah. Also be aware of what you do as a community member. I mean, I wrote this blog post about like always tweet from the source. Like if somebody finds an article that says like, okay, I don't know, say something stupid that a tech publisher would say and say like, Modernizer slows down your page 40%. And then he comes up with random numbers and a few diagrams so it looks cool and it's fine. And people would only tweet that and link to their site. That site was only written to get clicks and show ads. It was not there to actually really know what Modernizer is about or what Modernizer should do. So always be sure that if you tweet that, if you retweet that, you're actually not helping Modernizer. You're not helping that. You're helping that tech blog to make money. So when you see a controversy, go back to the data. Go back to something. And what pains me most, and I'm not naming and shaming, but that doesn't help anybody. But what annoys me most is that there's so many people in the community who think they can talk about large corporations and go what's going on in there. Like, Google should do this. If Microsoft did that, they would make more money. That browser is dead, that technology is dead. And you're like, that's not helping anybody. I would love to do a research of like all the wrong predictions of 2011 and actually make like a top 10 of people that keep trying to punch over their own weight and really don't have anything to say about it. It's so easy to make assumptions about large players that you don't have a control over, rather than like doing something yourself. I called it prison tactics in the past. It's much easier if you beat up the first big guy on the first day. The smaller ones will not pick on you anymore. So if you don't have much to say, make sure you say bad things about big players, and that just bores me.
Yeah, it seems kind of childish. There's a lot of it gets personal and then it just gets blown up, and then you look at it from the outside and you're just like, whoa. Like, I just want to know what's the coolest new JavaScript thing. Okay.
But disagreement is great. I mean,
yeah, it is. Yeah, it can be constructive.
And it's also healthy for the community in general.
Yeah,
definitely. Yes.
PPK and me, we got to know each other when I wrote my first article for List Apart back then, and his comment was, his blog article was that my code is total shit and I stole his idea. Because on the mailing list, he came up with the idea. We both came up with the idea at the same time. I was the first one to implement it, and Zeltman contacted me to write the article for List Apart. So basically, we're good friends now. Our whole thing started with him calling me a thief and a liar and a bad coder, and I was just, I think, clever enough to say like, hey, where did that come from, and not like, no, you're a thief and a bad coder.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's very important, and yeah, I think it's great that you're talking about it. I also really like your talk about that. So next question is, how do you, especially for developers in Germany, maybe you have specific thoughts on that. How can you get involved in bringing the web forward? Standards, how to push that, and is there anything like, because and is it for if somebody wants to blog about the new cool thing that they did in JavaScript? Should they do it in German or should they do it in English? What would be the better thing to do?
Well, it's
a bit unfair, so I'm the only native German speaker.
Yeah, but I would like to know what our thoughts.
So, I mean, I think one thing that I've seen is that the Japanese JavaScript community is they're intense and so impressive. There's so much talent there.
It's amazing.
And they're the first to implement a lot of things that everyone else follows years later. But we see very little of it. There's a jsdo.it is kind of their version of JS Fiddle, and crazy things go up on there. And so that's like now the one place where the rest of the developers can kind of see what's happening inside the Japanese front-end dev community. But up until that, it's kind of been a black box. So I think that the language barrier definitely has hampered their the ability of everyone else to learn from them. So
You're in favor of the English.
Favor of English, for sure. And I think, as far as getting involved, every good open source project has a get involved page. In jQuery, we struggled for a long time to be able to document and list out what are all the ways you can get involved. Of course, one thinks of adding patches, but writing tests, writing documentation, helping other people in IRC, helping other people in the forum, blogging about your techniques of organization or whatever, all those things help. And so finally getting involved page for any open source project is a really good way to kind of get a handhold with a community, people that you can become friends with and help kind of mentor each other to become better at things.
Is there a difference between blogging about something for the entry level, like teaching newcomers to do some awesome new technique that has been picked up by the author themselves, and actually blogging about totally new stuff, insanely new stuff?
There's definitely a difference, and I think though that the talent of real good blogging comes in explaining very, very bleeding edge things in a tutorial fashion for beginners. And there's not many people out there. We have this big divide of here's how you start with jQuery, and here's how you rotate sounds in 3D and whatever in jQuery. So we have this divide, but going back to the localization thing, in Mozilla it works that way. It's a very successful project, Firefox and all the other stuff we do, because we actually localize it to all the languages as well. And it's more important actually to run a community in the other language countries than actually have documentation only in your own language. I think the German web development community, and that's why I never got involved much. I moved out in 1999, so basically that was one thing as well. I always found it's behind. It's very much behind the others, because there's great stuff coming, like the web crowd calendar and these kind of things, much more thorough than what I see in English or American blogging, which is a very trait of the German language. You can't say wishy-washy things without sounding like stupid. Yeah. But it doesn't help us if we wait until things are perfect and start blogging about them. I think if we want to revamp the German community, it would make much more sense to translate hard bleeding edge stuff into German, or write a German introduction to the thing and then point to the real resource. Okay. So to handhold the community into getting into where the real things are happening, and to do community meetups and find speakers that are actually talking and force them to speak English, for example, or to do communication in English to train ourselves up a bit. It sounds terrible that we have to do that, but just as a German, learning English is so much easier than an English person learning German.
Yeah, that's true. Just getting back to this question again. I completely agree with what Paul said, and the interesting part is, for example, in Russia, it's completely the same story, so much going on, and fortunately I speak Russian, so I can understand what's going on there, and I also ask them to actually write for Smashing or other blogs or whatever, because there are so cool techniques that they develop, and they're kind of closed in their environment, and they don't get through, and there's always this barrier, English barrier, whatever it is, so right now has the first writer who actually agreed to translate something from Russian to English. Took a while. Okay. And the different perspective in terms of German web design scene, had Dr. Web running for a while. Sven was running it for 10 years, and then we had the problem that we couldn't find. It was really difficult to find good writers who were willing to write regularly on CSS, JavaScript, web design stuff.
The irony of it is that self-HTML was probably the most concise and best documentation the web had ever had. Yes. But it was only translated into Spanish, never into English.
That's true.
I never got this. I never got my head around that.
Unfortunately, it wasn't maintained anymore.
No, it fell apart quite quickly.
It's been there for some years on the channel.
It was great.
So basically, I learned HTML through self-HTML actually. So not only HTML but JavaScript and stuff like that as well, entry level. So one step could be to find people to translate English resources into German to help the German population learn, I don't know, JavaScript, HTML5, some new transform stuff in CSS3 more quickly. And the other way around, to translate German stuff like the WebCrowds blog into English.
Yeah.
So
It's
our
a lot
American
of-
friends
it's
can
a lot of work, though. It's a lot of
enjoy.
work. It's a lot of work. Like the French community does it that way. The French community has a company called Pompage that actually translate other people's articles and books, and they're full-time employees, and it costs a lot of money to do that. And as I speak French, I've been to several French conferences, and they were amazing. They talk about really, really good stuff. They talk about the accessibility work in France is so much better than any other country. Well, except for India, funnily enough. And but we never heard of them because they're French, and I think that's just such a sad thing. So it's, the full translation is one idea. I think it's much more interesting to have an introductory blog post that's saying like, hey, at this English resource they're discussing these things. Here's 5 points that they're discussing. Go over there, try to find it out. If you get stuck, make a comment. Let's have a comment thread about it, where we can actually translate bits of it in case you get stuck.
Yeah.
So instead of doing a one-on-one translation, you just actually help guiding a understanding in another language that way.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's actually what we're doing with our podcast. We always, I think all the links are always going to English resources. So basically we're always pointing, but we're talking in German on the podcast. So that's definitely what we're doing, and I think that's also what we believe. Also on our blogs, we do similar things like that. So for me, I always find it difficult because I want the German community to kind of learn more and to be more bleeding edge and, you know, to get excited about it. Because I have the feeling we have a lot of 9-to-5 developers. And so I have to write in German to reach more people, but at the same time everything is in English, and you also want to communicate with the English community, right? Because everything is basically going on over there. So it's a difficult topic for me personally.
Just interesting point I wanted to mention. For example, if you take the Netherlands as an example, they actually do both. So they do a lot in Dutch, but they also do a lot in English. So maybe if you just find this right balance, and you can write a blog post in English, and then you can sum up great discussions in Dutch, for example.
Yeah.
It always works this way as well.
There's a lot of things missing. I mean, like the German Flash community, for example, had amazingly good people, and I think better than anywhere else, but I only learned about them randomly because a friend of mine runs the FFK forum, the Flash forum. Always like FFK, anyways. And he said it's deteriorating now as well because a lot of people are moving to HTML5 and other things. But yeah, there was great resources in Flash in German, a great community as well. But it seems to be like as soon as people move out of the country or start working for Google, going to Switzerland and speak English mostly, they're not caring about blogging in German anymore either.
Yeah, sure. What interests me a lot is development of the mobile web. So, do you think that browsers are going to become so powerful that they basically can, substitute the native apps, or not? Is it a question of the APIs?
Yeah, I think so on mobile. It's because the native apps are, because the platform the OS platform is closely linked to the application platform. Native apps will always have an edge as far as capability. They will always have the feature before it's available on the browser on the platform. And so I think they'll always be more powerful. And of course, it's probable that they'll always have a performance edge. So that's nice for them. But of course, writing a web app for mobile, you can run on your 3 capable mobile browsers of Android, iOS, and Opera Mobile, and Firefox Mobile. I'm running Firefox and Firefox Beta on my Android phone now, and so now whenever I click a link and it's like, what browser do you want to open? I have Opera Mini, Opera Mobile, Firefox, and it was just like an enormous list, and I'm like, what today? I love it. So mobile browser will always be behind, but they have, of course, huge advantage of reach, and so and because actually, so on mobile we have, I think everyone could agree that we have a quicker update rate on mobile, and so we can actually target more future-facing features on the mobile environment rather than on desktop. So I think that frees us up a little bit more. Like a lot of mobile webs use Flexbox for layout, and so it's pretty exciting. And I think it'll continue to flourish despite living on a platform that kind of competes with it.
I think the openness of the web will make it win in the end. It's just much easier to have as a distribution platform. Trying to get into an Android store is okay. Trying to get into the Apple store, much of a harder problem. If you're a little unknown company, it is actually your living thing to put in front of people. It's much harder to do. We just released the Open Apps platform as well for Mozilla, and we're actually working on the together with Google actually on opening the hardware on mobile phones to JavaScript. And actually what I like about it most is that we're thinking about security much more than the native people do, because it's not that much of a problem. We always have it in the back of our head. You're like, yeah, we could have full screen stuff years ago, but you could have phished people's passwords with that by simulating a browser. So we have to think about much more what we do. I think a big mistake that people are making is like trying to compete directly with native code. We will never be able to do that. I used to write an assembly code. It will always be faster than anything else. So you cannot compete with that. And it's not a point of it. And funnily enough, what amazes me is how bad some of the native code is as well. I mean, I've got an Android phone, I've got an XSS, and I just, for laughs, I just downloaded Need for Speed. It's rubbish. You cannot play it at all. And it's not because they wrote a bad app, it's just because they converted an existing app onto the Android platform without thinking about the limitations and the ideas of the platform. So the screensaver is not stopped. So halfway during the race, your phone just shuts off. And these kind of little things that a web developer would have thought of. So a lot of the shifting of apps around and saying like native code is always better. It's always good to find these examples and say like, well, you just don't want to put much effort into it, and you just don't want to make it different. A web application can always be different than a native application because it's already connected. Like when Angry Birds updates, I download 16 meg. Why? It's just a new level. This could be a JSON object of 5K. And that's the kind of things we should be thinking about.
So while there's things you will want to do in native code, the web stuff on the mobile platform as well as on the desktop platform is going to win in the long shot because it's open. Because the resources are out there. Everyone can learn it. It's not black magic.
Well, also fixing. The main thing about the success of open source browsers was that we were always faster in releasing fixes for things. We didn't have to wait until the next MSI installer coming out for Internet Explorer to fix something. We just rolled out a new browser. And it's wonderful you can't hide anything in open source. So what is wrong will be obviously found and fixed, and that's a wonderful thing about open source. So I think also when it comes to hiring developers in open technologies, it will be much easier to get people, although there's not many good developers right out there. But to teach people up in open technology with all the stuff we have on the web is much easier than to teach somebody how to become an iOS developer because he has to go into a dark corner and learn it and not allowed to talk to other people about it.
Before leading over to the next and final topic, because we're kind of hard pressed.
Did you understand it?
Yeah, nice watch. IWC. No. Great. Now I lost it. You just said there isn't a great many great and awesome developers out there for the open web, and I would like to disagree, because not everyone has the time or the means to actually put something out there.
No, I didn't mean that there's not many good out there. I'm saying we don't have enough that we need right now. There's so many jobs out there for good web developers, and they get filled up by back-end people that get re-educated by sending to a training course rather than hiring somebody from the outside is much better.
I'm a back-end person, re-educated. So.
You're doing good stuff. So now teach other back-end people about that.
I'm trying. I'm writing articles in German. So. Okay. Next and final topic.
Okay. Do you want to say something to that topic?
No, actually, the only point I wanted to mention is that, of course, You know, we have something like that, discussion like that on Smashing. So there's always the issue of platform. So it's easier for people to develop an iPhone app and then put it in the App Store and then earn money on it. So if your final goal is to try to earn money, well, maybe you should go with iPhone if you want to, if you have to.
Do
right?
you? I don't see the numbers. I don't see them. I see the press releases. I see the stories of the 12-year-old kid in the garage that came up with something like Angry Birds and made millions with it. But I don't see the longevity of it. I don't see the millions of developers that go out there and say like, well, I made my first million on the App Store. There's a lot of marketing and press going on about this.
It's up to designers to those who create streaming products to decide what platforms they're using. Because they really feel that they have best chances on be it iPad, be it iPhone, whatever it is. Okay, well, it's for them to decide. We can't say them, hey, please use open standards, you have to. But they're using what they want anyway.
No, but I mean, when you say like when you want to make money and you go for iOS and be in the App Store and it's going to get quickly, I don't believe that story anymore. Because the App Store is full. And it's really hard to get your app found there as well. And when you look at it, it's like everything is like, oh, it's like angry worms, angry elephants, and not just like, there's like copycat stuff going on there right now. So, I don't know. It's like, it's a very simple story to tell, to say like, hey, you made money, but I really would like some stats on that. I really would like people to see.
So, basically, back to the native versus web topic. I'm interested in your guys' opinions on what's the future of UI, user interface. I mean, when I install an application on my Mac, I expect it to behave like an application on the Mac, like swipe and resize and move around and whatever.
When I resize on one corner,
right, have cool toolbars and stuff. If I install an application on a Windows machine, I expect it to behave like an application on the Windows machine. Same goes for iOS, not so much for Android, actually, but you get the picture. On the web, I can do whatever I want. Everyone can do whatever they want. Is that a problem, or is that an opportunity?
Well, I wouldn't say that everybody can do whatever he or she wants. Of course, in theory, yes. But they also have these usability patterns and things that people do because, well, this is how it works on the web. Because people know, okay, you need to have a search box which should look like a search box, otherwise people will not be able to find the search box, right? So, of course, in terms of how the site works, well, there are no rules. But I think that people are, right now, especially right now, people are really trying to create effective interfaces which work, rather than which are just beautiful. Of course, well, it goes both ways, but I think that people right now are really trying to create cool, great products that work well. So, and when it comes to that, it doesn't really matter what the interface looks like. Unless they're following certain, well, expectations that the user has, it's okay.
Okay, let me clarify. I'm not so much talking about how it looks, but about how it feels. So actually, user interaction.
Right.
So
I think the main problem there is like that most designers will totally disagree with you. That saying like, I myself, I'm the same. I like it when a website, for example, shows me native controls, that I'm on a Windows machine now, that I'm on a Mac, that I'm these kind of things. You know, that like I know what the thing looks like. I expect it to look like that. I don't have to learn it again. But most people don't agree with that. That's why they build their own. We used to build Flash forms and Flex forms that all look completely different to the things that you put on the web. UX is evolution on the operating system as well. I mean, if you look back at when people always get very crazy about how beautiful everything is that Apple does, look at QuickTime on Windows a few years ago with where the volume control was a real control, which was the most pointless thing ever. I think that actually, if you look at the signs right now, and I don't know if it's just a fad or if it will go that way, that the operating systems will become more and more a background thing, and the interface is not the operating system anymore. Windows 8 looks like a website with the big rectangles. The switch in Lion now that you actually change the scrolling order predicts me that all the next Apple devices will have a touch screen, because the scrolling, turning it around, doesn't make sense when you use a mouse, but it totally makes sense if you would touch the screen. So I think actually more than the UX of the web going to use stuff from the operating system, I think the operating system is becoming more and more just a background stack of APIs and file access, and the interface will be much more an HTML5 interface, even in the operating system of the future. I mean, Chrome OS is another one of those. I mean, I got a Chromebook, I tried it the other day, 1 week, just use a Chromebook in the cafe. And it works. It just, to me, as an old man of computing, I still feel like, okay, was my file explorer working? Was my terminal where I can put my Unix commands? But most of the end users really don't care. They just want to watch their videos, to get their music, chat with their friends, and that could be done with a web interface as much as it can be with a native one.
So what about, let's say, a listing? I used to click a next button or a previous button. The iPhone and the Android phones showed us swiping. I've got a MacBook Pro, multi-touch gesture stuff.
Yeah.
So I just want to swipe that thing below my cursor. Why does every website have to implement such a functionality by itself again, over and over?
I think it's conditioning. I think it's partly being scared that users of the past that never touched a touch device, that never learned that swipe gesture, that never trusted that swipe gesture will work, still get something that works for them. So there's no way to have a next and previous button. There's no problem having a next and previous button that could be progressively enhanced to a swipe gesture. But it's a fallback for not blocking out people who are not conditioned like you are yet.
The point I was trying to make is not that I can have progressive enhancement. Yes, of course, I can have it. I should have it. The point is that I have to implement those features myself. Me, the author of the application. There is no general toolkit I can rely on for stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like file access, that's an HTML5 API. That's a toolkit I can use across browsers and maintain a specific functionality. We don't really have those things for the UI yet.
Well, we're working on the device input APIs, which is like it's touch gesture, multi-touch support. It's also voice recognition, which is hyped immensely because I can't see 400 people in an office all talking to their computer. It's like facial recognition over camera, these kind of things. So we're working on those. But I totally agree with you. I think we've, as an HTML5 community, we totally failed to implement the basics of user interface. The HTML5 form controls differ so much across the different browsers, and it's really hard to progressively enhance them. Because even if a date field is support, not every browser has a date calendar pop-up picker. Like Chrome has this thing with up and down arrows, which starts with like a Unix timestamp or something if you don't set something. So this is something we've been pushing ahead the whole year. And instead we get really excited when we have 4,000 goldfish in WebGL in 60 frames rather than 20 frames per second in the other browser. So we really need to start working on the UX.
Right. What really caught my attention was a proposal for a dialogue. There's an HTML5 element. There used to be one dialogue. They dropped it, I think. Now they're trying to reinvent it.
I moved to menu, didn't it?
There's a new, the past few months. There's
right. The dialogue thing is supposed to, replace those modal boxes.
So it's like prompt or confirm on steroids.
Less JavaScript.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's generalization of UI, UX. We need more of those.
I think that there's platform level improvements that have to happen that were not at all possible before, even if you throw a bunch of JavaScript at the problem. All of those are already happening right now, and so that's good. But then there's a lot of places when the web platform takes inspiration from things that have already been happening in JavaScript libraries. The latest is element.find and element.findAll is being added, which is an improvement on query selector. And it's going to be awesome, and it's really short to type instead of query selector. So we're going to
hit escape and make autocomplete in text.
Oh my god, that's so much work. Or like request animation frame. It's ridiculous. There's a lot of APIs that the reason why people use jQuery is because the API is nice. So anyways, what I was saying was that the web platform takes a lot of inspiration from what JavaScript library authors have already done. And we're seeing that with web components, we're seeing that with model-driven views, we're seeing that with a lot of things that are happening. And so if there's a JavaScript library that introduces a new interaction paradigm and then everyone is using it, like people are noticing, people want to make that happen in the browser natively. So.
What I actually also missing, and it comes back into your question about the user interface. I love keyboard shortcuts, and I would love to use them when I'm navigating whatever article it is. I don't know, just using JK for previous article, next article, and stuff like that. And if you had something like a common vocabulary, saying, okay, you press H and you go to the top. You press C, you go to the comments. You press JK.
You don't want to go there. We had access keys. And that never worked because of that reason. Because first of all, every software, a browser is already a software that has lots of keyboard shortcuts already assigned to things. And they actually differ from operating system to operating system. And so a lot of your controls are already not available for you because they're already preset with something else. If your website uses that all of a sudden, people complain that their browser doesn't do it anymore. To the browser vendor, because you've overwritten what we've done. And the other problem is internationalization. Because you can do it in English, but you cannot do it in Japanese or in Chinese as simply as that.
But can you say, for example, if you're browsing an article, so you are in the browser, you're not accessing URL bar, you're not accessing search field.
Well, there were accessibility guidelines in Europe, especially in Germany and also in England, that actually defined keyboard shortcuts for every article that is out there, and they never got implemented by anybody because people thought it's a stupid thing to use H for that. It should be another one. It's a great idea to have, like, I think the J and K in Google Reader. I don't use Google Reader with the mouse at all, and I find myself doing the same things in other mail clients and these kind of things. They don't support it, and I hate it. But it's something, I guess, that is a conditioning thing. If more people use it, then we might have a chance to do it. But finding a one-size-fits-all keyboard shortcut is something that the accessibility world has been working on for 14 years and totally failed at doing so.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have to wrap it up. We're kind of over time. So thank you very much for your time. And it was awesome to have you guys here.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks.